Hello. This is Abigail Barella with Sparkle and Shine Guidance, and this is all about the North Node and the South Node changing signs. It happens about every 18 months, and it really tells us a lot about the collective and it's like our internal compass, and we all have a time period that we were born in, an 18-month time period that tells us where our north and south node are. They're polar opposites. The north node shows us our dharma, where our soul wants to go in this lifetime, and so when collectively we have it changing signs, we are all being collectively driven to learn these lessons. And so if you were born under this influence, which you would be if you were born 1945 to 46, 1964, oh geez, yeah, 64 to 65, don't quote me on that, and then 1983 to 84, and then another time 18 years after that. So it's about every 18 years that it comes back around. And so when you're 18, you have your first nodal return, and then you get your second one around 36, 37. So got to do the math, these mathematical things that I have to do on the spot really show where my brain's at. But thankfully, we're going to come into a more mentally clear, mentally agile time with the North Node being in Gemini. So the North Node is showing us collectively where we're being guided to go into and what we're being guided to release through the South Node. Our South Node in our birth chart shows us in the past, so if you believe in past lives, in the past, where we have ascertained certain gifts, certain talents that we can draw from, but we are not meant to live fully in that energy. We are supposed to be going towards our Dharma, going towards our North Node. So when we have the South Node collectively in a certain sign, we're wanting to release that. And the cycle that we've been in has been the South Node in Capricorn, which has to do with government, it has to do with systems, has to do with the patriarchy, it has to do with go, work, the CEO energy. And we are meant to drop away some of that. And now as we move to where the South Node will be in Sagittarius, it's going to be about letting go of strict doctrines or dogmatic ideas, really being very one-sided, and it also has to do with politics. So Capricorn has to do with the government and the way that it systematizes things and how it functions in capitalism, and then Sagittarius has to do with the political system. And so obviously we have a big election coming up and all of those things which fall under Sagittarius. So we are meant to let go a little bit in those dogmatic ways of the polarity of seeing things one way or another. And we're supposed to be moving into the Gemini energy, which Gemini has to do with our closer knit community. Sagittarius has to do with travel around the globe and the bigger global community, the big picture thinking. And we are meant, when the North Node is in Gemini, to be looking at our individual communities and how, when we do that, think globally, act locally, how we can really get a lot more functioning. And we're going to need this because as we're shifting and growing, and a lot of the work that we are doing in Cancer North Node time was that we are doing the nurturing and the mothering of ourselves. And then as we move into Gemini, we're going to be wanting to do that in our communities and how to navigate and organize our communities and to think smaller. We're going to see more people doing, using their hands, working with their hands. That's very Gemini. Another thing with Gemini, because it is ruled by Mercury, Mercury is the god of commerce, the god of the messenger. And it's that whole thing, don't shoot the messenger, right? And when we want truth, sometimes it's going to come from a source that we don't necessarily want to hear it from, or that we might be upset and we don't want to hear the truth. But this is really a time where we're going to be, some illusions that we've had and some beliefs that we had about politics, about the system, are all being, like, the veil is being removed, and it's going to be a little upsetting. And so with that, Mercury also has to do with, because Mercury could go to the underworld and bring up information for us, and he could also go to the upper world and bring down information for us. And so we also have to learn how to listen to our intuition in a different way when we're getting those intuitive hits, and when we're getting information about discernment and discerning where this idea came from. I talked about in one of my other videos really locating fear and kind of the seed of fear and seeing if it's even from you. Sometimes we're just picking things up from the news, we're picking things up from someone around us. And with this North Node in Gemini, we're really going to be asked to get clear and really understand that there is a lot of programming and societal influences that aren't serving us anymore. And so to discern for ourselves what we want to hold on to, what we want to release, and looking at where this transit is happening for you. And if you want an individual reading, I'm going to be doing individual readings. They're $17 and super affordable, and a super great way for me to look at your chart and tell you where the eclipses will be happening, because that's ultimately what the North and South Node, they're calculation points that show us where the eclipses will be happening in the next 18 months. However, because Gemini and Sag are both mutable signs, there's a lot of changes still happening. And so we will have that first eclipse season where it's like a transition time where we will still see the it happening in Cancer, the first one. And as we move further into the sign, I think in December is when we'll have the first Sagittarius solar eclipse. And so that's going to be really powerful. But whenever we're in a mutable cycle, we're going to see a lot of changes happening. And sometimes that's not very comfortable, right? So just being aware of that, being aware of where this is happening in your chart, and if you're in a nodal return time period. If you were born with the North Node in Gemini, then you're in your nodal return. If you were born with your North Node in Sag, then you're in what I would call a nodal opposition, where it's kind of turning everything inside out. And so both of those times are important to know if they're happening, and so you can get one of those readings with me, or you can just look up when you're born and see what your nodes are in. Some birds are flying by. So Gemini is an air sign. Thank you, birds, for reminding me. Gemini is an air sign, bringing in lots of information, and sometimes it can be a little bit too much. But ultimately, when the North Node is there, there is something about that information that we are supposed to be picking up and supposed to be learning new ways to do things. So Gemini also has to do with our nervous system, making sure we're tending to our nervous system, making sure that we're not overloading our nervous system. And this is especially true with when you're paying attention to a lot of what's happening, and there's going to be more of this. There's a lot happening and shifting and changing. So how can you tend to your nervous system during this time? Okay, and then the other thing that I want to say is that it's going to be forming a trine to Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius. So the air signs are really active in this following year from May on. And Aquarius and Gemini both have to do with information, and Aquarius has to do more with society and with the larger community, and Gemini has to do with that smaller community, your neighborhood, your family, your siblings. And so it's really important to know that these things are all going to be activated for the next year or two. And so we also have Venus retrograding, which I'll make a whole other video about, Venus retrograde in Gemini. So there's a lot of Gemini, and in general, when we get to Gemini season, it's a very busy nervous system activating time. And so it's just extra important in these next few months, especially in May, to take extra good care of your nervous system and really being aware of how much information you're taking in, how you're discerning information, and how you are working with your hands. So what kind of things can you take up in this next few months that can be working with your hands in a positive way? There's so much more I want to say, but I'm going to end there because I feel like otherwise it's just like rambling on. Knowing what other planets or placements that you have in Gemini can be also really helpful. So if your sun, moon, rising is in Gemini, this is going to be an extra important time period for you. So it's a good time to get a full-on chart reading as well. And you can do that through the link I'll post below. Thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of April and May and whenever you're watching this. So yeah, thank you. Take care.